Welcome, everybody. My name is Garrett Sussman. I am the head of content at Traject. And for this webinar, I'm really excited. This is the early stage agency challenges, preparation, anticipation, acceleration. We are in a crazy era, and a lot of people are actually starting agencies. They might be in their first year. A lot of unique challenges, no matter where you are in the life of your agency. But I've got three expert agency owners who are joining me today to talk about, some of the challenges, some of the milestones you should be thinking about, some insights on how you can succeed in the agency world. And I'm really excited to find out what they've got. So first off, we are joined by Selena Vidya, who is the president of digital strategy of the digital strategy agency Orthris Media and partner coach at the Agency Builder with Nick Eubanks. She has put together a wealth of resources for agency owners to scale. She has 10 plus years in the agency space with 1 million cups of coffee consumed. Thank you so much for joining us today, Selena.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So next up, we have Akvile DeFazio, who, someone who lives for connecting people, making the connection between the consumers and brands. That's what Akvile does. She's the president of Advertise, which is a social media advertising agency. And as a conversion-driven marketer, she helps businesses expand their online visibility and reach their goals via Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest ads. Thank you for joining us today, Akvile.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And finally, we have none other than Michael King of iPullRank. Mike has been with 14 years of experience in digital marketing, 25 years in web development. He makes his clients proud by always being proactive. He is all over the place and, always cranking out really amazing content. He is an educator and just delivers success constantly for his clients. Thank you for joining us today, Mike.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's talk that digital marketing agency life. And so this really, the focus of the webinar is on that, first few years of starting up your agency and what you three have learned from your experience driving and building successful agencies. So Akvile, I'd love to start with you. When you're starting a digital marketing agency, and you're trying to figure out what your plan is, what your goals are, what are some of those key milestones that you should be setting in that first year to set yourself up for success?
Well, in that first year, we're kind of an anomaly, just to give a little backstory, if you don't mind. So I decided to take the leap and go out on my own. And for 2 years, I was just freelancing on my own. And I didn't previously work at an agency, which I think kind of was the downside of that I jumped into wanting to create an agency where I didn't have prior experience. So I needed kind of that ramp up time, but it gave me a lot of time to start talking to other agency owners. So it's great that you're doing this to kind of help other people that might be in a similar situation, whether they're just getting started or thinking about it. So once we finally incorporated, the reasons that I decided to is because, I was starting to get more clients. I wondered how much more I could earn. And I realized that some things needed to be kind of set up in that first year after I incorporated. So incorporation was the first thing. I decided that I needed to have more set income goals personally for myself, and then what revenue goals were for my company going forward. And in that first year, I also wanted to determine, who to hire and how to hire them, and eventually hire that first person and start training them up.
Do you agree, Vidya? So when it comes to that first hire, when it comes to employees, is that a milestone that you've experienced, or do you have some similar milestones when it comes to that year one, or some other ones that you'd like to add to
that? For me, I was more, so I do think it's important to have the hiring milestones, but I was also trying to stay really lean. So when I started my agency, I was still doing a lot of the work. So I was kind of hybrid consulting and also doing smaller agency style work within the company. So what I did is I figured out what I wanted the revenue for Orthris to be in the first year, keep the lights on, make sure that we can do what we need to do, and also what I needed. But then I tried to figure out how many hours am I spending on certain key tasks that can then go to a contractor. I didn't want to go the route of doing any kind of full-time hire, and I still don't have full-time hires outside of myself and my partner. So for me, it's more, what can I offload to contractors and who is proficient enough to do that?
Gotcha. That is tricky, right? When it comes to like an elastic workforce in year one and based on the clients and the projects. Mike, what do you think about, kind of the people you're working with, contracting versus hiring, and some of the other milestones that are like were on your, radar when you first started?
Honestly, I didn't really have any milestones. I was just like, let's see if this works. And kind of similar to what Selena just said, it was all like contractors at first. And so the way I did it is like, okay, I'm gonna start this agency. I put like $5,000 in a bank account, and I was like, let's see what happens. Like, and I looked at my own bank account, was like, all right, if I don't make a single sale in the year, I'm gonna be able to pay my rent for the rest of the year. So I was like, all right, let's just see what happens. And it was largely like, all right, a whole bunch of business just kind of like came out of nowhere. And I'm like, all right, well, I've got friends that worked in all these different agencies because I worked at like 5 different agencies before I started this. And my only milestone in my head was like, I don't want to be like any of those agencies. I just want to do something that's better. But if I had to do it again, I mean, obviously the first milestone is like get some clients, right? And then from there, I would say, sit down and build out what your processes need to look like, because that was one of my biggest problems, because I just am not really a process oriented person. And so what happens is when you bring on like even contractors and you're like, yo, do this thing, and if you don't have a process of how it's meant to be done, you're likely going to end up disappointed with what they do, and you're going to feel like, well, they only did exactly the thing I told them, and then you got to end up like redoing the work and so on. So I would say, just come up with a methodology for how you're going to get your clients, and then how you're going to effectively serve them so that you can continue to do whatever it is you want to do from there.
And that's a perfect segue, because processes are hard, but they're essential, right? And a lot of agency owners don't necessarily know how to do it right the first time. Selena, you just mentioned you have a ton of processes that you've kind of perfected and worked on. What are those processes like right when you're starting that you need to have that are essential?
Yeah, so this is kind of tricky for me. I do have some key processes from the first year, but I came from bigger agencies. So first I had to unlearn the way that everything was done because I knew it wouldn't work for me and what I wanted to do. So the first thing that I realized was a big pain point in the first year was contracts, like getting solid contracts in place, understand what language you have in there, how you're going to protect yourself. What do clients have that are beneficial in the contracts as well, so it works out for everybody. The other thing, which took me a very long time, is what a sales process looks like, because much like Mike said, a lot of friends and referrals and things like that came into me, and I had to figure out, okay, am I going to have decks? Am I going to do in person? Like, what are these things going to look like? And then the other thing is just using project management systems. Like, you need a central place to have everything in, especially when you're using contractors. You don't want everything to live in your email where you're digging around for stuff. And then the other thing is, what is your post-sales process going to look like? So, you may not be thinking about that during the first year, but a lot of your future clients are going to come from recommendations and case studies and testimonials. So how are you going to follow up for anybody who, may have only worked with you for a short period of time or is still an ongoing client after that first year?
So do you document everything, or did you find in your first year winging it? Like what do you typically see with a lot of the agencies that you've kind of advised?
Usually winging it and just trying to figure out what works. But you can only do that for so long. So you can wing it as long as you need to, but I really recommend that you get just processes in place, understand what your deliverables are going to look like, how you're going to deliver them, what communication looks like, and make sure you're solid, so that when you're gonna plug people into your ecosystem, again, like Mike said, with contractors, they know exactly what to do and how it needs to be done.
I feel like, how about you when it comes to, the processes early on? Did you wing it as well? Did you know you needed some things in place? When did you figure things out?
I wung it for the first time, or winged it. I was just kind of learning as I was going, trial and error, but then I realized, I think about year 3, that I really needed to get documentation in order, especially if I was looking to outsource some work, hire some staff, because how else would I kind of import what my brain was thinking and how we wanted to do things, especially since my company's half of my name. So it's really about my reputation, and I wanted to convey that. So it took me a little bit longer to actually get everything in writing, but it's been very helpful to have that, and it's made it much more efficient in the long run to just send that over to people now.
So what would you have done differently in that first year that, now looking back on it, that you didn't do? What would you have tried?
Uh, Well, it's hard to tell because in the first year it was just so much trial and error and you're trying to figure things out. So knowing exactly what you wanted to do was the challenging part. But I think I could have started just making more notes and having other documents and spreadsheets where I realized maybe frequently asked questions for clients or maybe frequent processes that I had to put into place and just start writing that down. So I wish I could go back and do that, but we're here now. So hopefully someone else will be tuning in and do that now.
Well, I mean, you all three of you, pretty much figured it out. I mean, there's a huge amount, and I know, okay, like you never figure it out. You're always trying to improve and get better. I saw you, Mike, but like, what were your major
Well, let
challenges?
me say something real quick. Like, I don't know how my business ran before I documented my processes. Like, I don't know how anything was getting done because now that we have it and it's so clear and it's so like do this, do this, do this, and like there's obviously space to be creative within that and so on. But I don't know how anyone was getting things done before because in some cases people were junior or some cases people were coming from other environments where they did things differently. So there were just so many suboptimal ways that we were doing things before. And again, like everyone said here, if you're starting an agency, spend the time to write down how you do things as soon as possible because it's such a game changer. Like you can't really scale until you do that.
Yeah, and I want to just jump in and say, I guarantee you, so I had a tendency to be like, well, I can just do it or explain it to somebody and it'll take less time. But the reality is, the time that you spend telling people how to change and do things, you should just document it and get it over with, and you'll save that time in the future.
Yeah, and honestly, it became fun. Like once I really sat down and was like, okay, what are these processes gonna look like? It just became like another cool challenge and project and another like skill set that I had to develop of like, how do you actually write this down such that anybody qualified can pick this up and do it the way you want to do it? Because at the end of the day, like that's what you're selling as an agency, like your process and people being able to do those things. So again, I don't know how we made it those first 3 years without that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And what were some of the like? Do you guys have any anecdotes of early on when you had one of those moments where it was maybe like a client communication that went wrong or a mishap or deliverable that didn't get across the line? What were some of those like kind of early year stumbles that you had that most agencies have that maybe they can avoid if they knew what you know now?
So for me, when I first started out, we were doing a good number of services, and one of the services that we were really good at, but was the absolute bane of my existence, was outreach and the time that it took to do outreach. And so, we continued to do that probably into year 3. And when I started looking at the time and the numbers, it just didn't make sense anymore. And it's also really hard to set expectations with outreach because clients either want to know, what is an average number you're going to achieve monthly? What are the links going to look like? And it's just really difficult. And we didn't really think about that in the first, year or two. And so a lot of the communication was kind of justifying, the ramp up time for outreach and what communication looks like and just trying to make sure that they understand. And for certain clients, that's just really difficult and you're never going to win the battle. So that's a service we actually ended up cutting out and doing training for because it works a lot better to empower the teams. And then I also think scope creep was something that I had an issue with, which is why I mentioned the contract thing. So, I'm somebody who I never want to feel like I'm doing a really crappy job. And I also don't want anybody that's working with us to feel that way as well. So I would overextend myself and do things outside of the bounds that we should because I so wanted to keep the client happy. And that just doesn't set a good, nothing good comes out of that.
I feel like, do you ever deal with scope creep early on, or was that?
Oh, yeah. As soon as, like, that's what I was thinking. As soon as Selena said it, I was like, oh yeah, that's happened way too many times. And you're trying to be flexible with the client, you want them to be happy, but at the same time you have to lay down some ground rules, manage expectations, do the education up front. And so then that way you're not suffering, in terms of how much time you're spending on the account and then having them take advantage of you and your staff or your contractors, and then making it less profitable for you in the long run. So scope creep is a huge thing. I unfortunately didn't have contracts early on as well. I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. Like, there's nothing damaging I could do, but I didn't think about it in the other way where, the client could take advantage of certain things. Another thing for contracts, always add in a clause of when you need to get paid by, because there have been a few instances where I've had to try to hunt down clients to get payment. And if you can, like, be lenient, be understanding, things can happen with either credit cards, or maybe they've had a changeover in their financial team, and then payment didn't get sent out on time. Like, that's totally happened. And it's good to be human and have those conversations, but there have been some clients where they just don't pay you, and then you want to be paid for your time and your services, but maybe add in a little clause into your contracts about, if you don't pay within X time, there's an additional fee that will be added as a penalty. So that usually will kind of help. But yeah, contracts are huge. And yeah, I think Mike, sounds like you wanted to say something on that too.
I didn't want to interrupt you. If you had more, please.
No, go ahead. I have other stuff, but I feel like I know some of the questions coming up, so I'm going to save it for that.
So on payment, that was something that we really had to learn the hard way, because we work with a lot of enterprise brands, and you would expect if you have a contract and you sent out the invoice and all that, you would get paid on the day you expect. I learned in the hard way that net 30 really means net 59, because there's no penalties until that 60th day. And so what we did is any contract that we sign, they have to pay 20% up front so that we mitigate that thing. And I wish we had done that a lot earlier. I didn't even realize that was like a option. And the thing is, like, there are no rules. You can do whatever you want. So once we started doing that, it just really helped with those cash flow issues that can come up just because your clients don't do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, and if it's okay, can I jump in with one more thing?
No, please. I mean, this is like, yeah, it seems like y'all are getting not triggered, but you're all like, yeah, that sucked.
Oh, I'm triggered.
No, well, there's one thing that I never see talked about much, and I don't know if it's really a thing, but when I used to work at agencies and I was the client contact, I would get, like you're saying, triggered if they wanted to talk to a director when I wasn't director level or someone above me. And I was like, why does this happen? So when I started my agency and I was kind of the front facing, and it was being built off my reputation and relationships, as I started bringing in contractors to do things, I would try to set it up so that clients were comfortable talking to my team members and not necessarily me. And I did have an instance of a client where they just did not want to talk to anybody but me, and it became really, really difficult. So I try to set the standard in the beginning that it's myself and my team. My team handles these things, and it sounds like a basic no-brainer, but it's just something that for some reason they don't take a team member as seriously when they're used to talking to you when you're just starting out.
That's an interesting point, that your roles do matter, and from the top, it's your responsibility to kind of set those communication styles and empower your team to do what they're supposed to do when working with clients. Speaking of clients, when you guys were building, what for each of you, and I feel we can start with you, is building your client roster. What did that look like? Was that, because obviously there's a lot of referrals and word of mouth at the beginning. Was it quick for you? Did you get too many clients? Did you have any sort of issues when you're building your client roster in those first few years?
Yes and no. So, fortunately, I've had a lot of people send clients my way over the years. I used to work, my last job in-house before I started my own thing was at a marketing conference company. So I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of people in our industry at events quite frequently across the globe. So I've always loved networking and just going to events, but that really kind of helped set the precedent of, getting my name out there. And then once I went on my own, I was afraid that wasn't going to kind of continue that snowball effect. But I've noticed that attending, different types of virtual events, in-person events when it's hopefully safe again soon, and just keeping the conversation going, trying to do events like this, maybe doing outreach, internal, external blogging, that's really helped kind of feed our funnel of leads and then turning them into clients. And with year one, I was just trying to take on as much as I could and seeing what that maximum amount that I could do that without getting burned out, because I love what I do for work. I want to help more companies, and I really just genuinely like getting results for our clients, like anyone would in our industry. But I got to the point where it's just too much too long, and that's kind of where I needed to figure out, how do I get help? How do I offload some work? How do I figure out a good balance? So one hard lesson I learned in year three is that I had two of our largest clients let us go in the same week, and it was 90% of our income. And I was just like, oh, what do I do? I've never done like formal business development. I was fortunate in the first 3 years to just keep getting a business word of mouth. But it wasn't anything that we did. It was just one of the CEOs quit, and the whole company kind of was like, we don't know what to do, so we'll regroup and get back to you. And the other one got acquired by a larger company. Unfortunately, they came back to us the following year and wanted to work with us again, but underneath the larger brand. But for 8 months after that happened, I was at a loss. I struggled for 8 months to try to figure out what to do. So that was a huge lesson in not putting all of your eggs in one basket and not banking on those, larger whale clients. If you land some of those, and just kind of diversify the size of your clients so that, if something happens, it's not going to impact your business that severely. And I think it's just important to figure out what the max is and how to split that up between your client sizes.
Selena, what was your story with you came from the agencies? I don't know. Did you bring clients over? Did you have to just start from scratch on your own? What was your client roster expansion story?
Yeah, so I essentially started from scratch. This story of the previous agency, having clients from there just wasn't really an option. And what I did is I started reaching out to friends and peers that I knew in the industry before I left my agency job to see if there's any smaller projects that I could take on and help build with them. And so by the time I left to start Orthrus, I did have 2 clients that I was working with, and then I was still speaking at conferences, trying to do any kind of webinar that I could. I was writing for publications like Moz, which have still gotten me client referrals from people seeing that. So a lot of it was just getting myself out there, trying to show that I had my own company and I was willing to do the work and meeting people. And I think for me, I felt a little like I fell into luck with the first set of clients because they were from relationships that I didn't do a lot of the proper things I should have been doing in the first year to maintain, leads and getting additional clients in. So when year 2 came, I'd realized that I also had a lot of my eggs in one basket because I had some agency relationships where we were doing work together in that manner as well. So I just started trying to continue to build relationships, being in communities. Traffic Think Tank is one that I had joined that's been great for relationships and referrals and communication and all of that stuff. So I think, just continually putting your foot on the gas and never feeling like you're good with clients. And like Akvile said, I also took on a lot of work the first year. So just, you're gonna have more work. It's just a matter of how you find it, whether it lines up with you.
And it's interesting too with both of you ladies having all your eggs in one basket. What advice would you have? How do you intentionally diversify? Right? Because like a lot of it feels like you're building up these pipelines. Like how do you do it on purpose so you're not in that situation going forward?
Great question. So we started, I was afraid to put this out there on social media because that's where most of, our business came through. But I said, what the types of clients that we were accepting currently, we're taking on. So I just made sure we're available and people knew what we're taking on, and if anybody had anybody to send our way. So I was really trying to get medium-sized clients because the big ones, they're great, but we know we ran into that predicament. And the small ones, I really want to help, but at the same time, they don't have large enough budgets. And unlike Mike and Selena, I'm on the paid search and paid social side of things. So it's really about how much budget you have for advertising, and we usually have to price it fairly so we're not earning more than what they can spend on advertising. So there's a fine balance there, and I think as long as you just market to the right people with the right message, that you can get those clients. Of course, you're going to get whatever comes down the pipeline in case people see it and they want your help. Then you can assess if you need, if you want to take those on, if they're the right fit for you. If not, if you can refer them out. because there are some agencies that like to focus on particular industries or even small businesses, and they've figured out ways to make it lucrative for their own success while servicing smaller clients.
It's a challenge. Like, Mike, did you work with enterprise customers as well? I mean, a range, but how do you diversify? What was your approach as you grew?
Well, I'm gonna answer the first question first. So me, because I've been doing a ton of. So it's like I decided I was gonna start this agency, and then it's like 2 weeks later I got 2 clients on the exact same day, and then suddenly I'm making like 12 grand a month, and I'm like, oh, I guess I have a company now. And so the being purposeful about the types of companies you go after for me wasn't something I did until after like I had a year of like, all right, I had all these clients. Which type did I like? Which type did I hate? Which types of engagements do I want to do? So really quickly we realized that we don't want to do full site builds for companies, because to the scope creep thing earlier, we're like, there's nothing but scope creep for a site build. And so we basically just segmented all of our clients into different groups, and we're like, all right, we want to go after more of these. And so what do these people need? What type of content do they need? What type of messaging do we need to put out to attract them? But in my case, because I worked at so many different agencies, there were a lot of people that were clients for those agencies that were like, yeah, ultimately we didn't really enjoy what we did with them. But we love your ideas and so on. But the problem is they come to you expecting the same type of thing that they got from that previous agency. And I'm like, that's not how we do things here. So, so it definitely changes the dynamic a bit. But I think, what it really comes down to is you've got to go through that exercise of being like, who do I want? What do they need? How do I get in front of them? Is it the type of thing where we need to do some sort of like outbound sales process to make it happen? Or is it the type of thing where just doing like the standard inbound stuff or whatever else you do will attract them, through speaking and so on? So it's just really about identifying who you're trying to get and then aligning your activities to go with that.
I can add one more thing. One thing that helped us kind of indirectly center around medium to large size clients is that we put in pricing minimums. So if you want account management, then we set a minimum. So, if people do reach out to us for account management, we do have that barrier of, there's a point of entry for, working with us. But if you want consulting, then we didn't have a barrier of a minimum for what they needed for their monthly ad spend. So that helped us as well to kind of gain those larger clients and just not have to deal with the smaller ones that we're not able to service.
Oh, are you having mic issues?
It looks like he froze up a little bit. Dance party.
I hope you can hear me. I got to figure out in terms of the audio.
Yeah.
But what I was gonna ask next is talking a little bit, moving on to the pricing models and the resource allocation strategies to test in the first year. So, Selena, if you could, speak a little in terms of what your experience was with pricing models, how to kind of test it depending on the service and depending on the client. What advice would you give there?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different pricing models first that you're probably going to go with. So you can do hourly pricing, you can do retainer pricing, or you can do just a flat fee one project pricing, depending on what you're doing. And when I first started, I was aiming for retainer, but I did have some hourly clients because the hope is that they'll convert to a retainer once you can get a sense of the hours spent, what you're producing for them, and the results you're bringing. So with hourly, the difficulty that I found with that is if you need to increase the amount of hours that you're putting on a project, the client is gonna question what you're doing to increase that, which is why the retainer model is really helpful, because give or take over the course of a couple months, you're always spending a little more or a little less on a project. So overall, it averages out. And then the flat rate project fee just makes sense for certain projects, like if you're doing a site build, or if you're doing an audit or a strategy or something like that. So I would recommend, if you're going into a specific pricing model, try to aim for a retainer. It makes sense most of the times. And then if you do have hourly, try to decide what that minimum hourly is going to be monthly, so that you don't have clients who just want an hour here or an hour there. Oh, we can't hear you.
Still can't hear you. I have a lot of thoughts on this, so I'm just going to start talking.
Go for it. Okay.
So I completely despise the hourly model, because I don't think it serves anybody effectively, because for the client, you know, it becomes like a variable cost that they can't really effectively predict for. It rewards the agency for showing more activity rather than showing outcomes or results. And it's also just very tedious thing to manage. Like, nobody wants to track their hours. No one wants to report on their hours, and then you got to like chase people around for it and so on. You still got to get them to track their hours, because you need that to determine how profitable you are and so on. But it's just like a kind of an antiquated model as far as I'm concerned. You know, it just doesn't put the focus where it needs to be. So for us, I guess we're technically considered retainer based, but we price things based on deliverables, right? So you know, as part of our analysis in the pitching process, we determine what you need, and then we align it with a series of deliverables, which makes sense for what it is that we would do. And then we add that up and we divide it across the amount of time that we think we need to engage with you to be effective. So it is effectively a retainer situation, and it allows us to really just focus on like, what are we trying to do here, rather than like, oh, you spent 40 hours this week, like, you know, why'd you guys take so long? And it really just puts the onus on us to be more like efficient and effective with the time that we have. And I was telling a story to somebody the other day of when I worked at a big multinational agency, and I was super excited to work there, and I was like building all these tools to make things like faster and more efficient and everything, and everybody on the team was super hype about it. And then I bring it to the SEO director, and he's like looking at his phone, not really paying attention to what I'm trying to show him. And then he looks up and he's like, who told you to do this? This is bad for utilization. And so what he was saying there is that you're cutting back on the hours that we can bill a client. So it doesn't really, that model doesn't really support, you know, getting the most for the client's dollar. And I want to have a model that does. So that's why I just don't like it.
Yeah, likewise. I started off hourly, and I soon quickly dug myself into a financial hole because I was becoming more efficient as I progressed with my work, and I was making less. So I too switched to the retainer model. However, we're still experimenting on the optimal pricing strategy, especially being an ad agency. We, you know, there's some projects we don't do that many audits, but typically we started billing percentage of monthly ad spend. But now I've realized that maybe we should start doing a base plus percentage of ad spend versus retainer model. So I think it depends on the client, and that's why we don't publish our pricing on our website, because every client has different needs, different ways that we can service them. It's not really a cookie cutter type of model, but I think it's really important for you to figure out what your expenses are in a given year, and what you need to cover that, and how much time that will take you and your staff, just to make sure that you are delivering great work to your clients. But you know, you can do that efficiently, and they can use your expertise, but you're also making what you need and exceeding, you know, hopefully exceeding your revenue goals.
Can you guys hear me now?
In a really strange way.
I can't hear you, but it's unable. I was able to.
That's really happening.
I feel like I just got hijacked into a sci-fi film.
Yo, dial in. Dial in.
Which is amazing. No, this is fantastic, and you guys should call it. One thing I'll talk to you before I go though is what are some common qualities that you see in successful agency owners? So you guys talk to a lot of agency owners in your network. What do you see when you're with friends? Like, who are the people that you admire that are just killing it? What are those qualities? You catch that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so.
Go ahead,
That
Selena.
sounded so strange.
So yeah, so common qualities. I think the ability to just keep a level head in a fast-paced environment is important because you are going to be spending a lot of time communicating with team members and clients, and you have to learn how to work under pressure in a way that is efficient for everybody and doesn't make you run around like a madman or a mad woman. I think great communication is really important, and it's something that I had to grow into as an agency owner. You can't always say what's on your mind, especially when it comes to clients, and you need to make sure that you're communicating what you want effectively. Coachability is another thing. So I have, a good group of peers that are agency owners that I talk to, and if you're not coachable, you're not going to be able to grow your agency in a strong way because you need to be able to understand what you can do better as a leader and as an agency owner. And then I think decisiveness is another quality. And it's something where, you grow into decisiveness. You need to understand what's going to work for a client, what is going to work for a service, and the decision to move forward with something. But you can't just sway in the center of something. You need to be able to take a stance when it comes to clients and work and your team members and stick to that, and then come back and reassess. And if you need to change that in the future, be malleable enough to do that.
Cool. I think I'm back. I thought I'd just call in and say how y'all doing. Hi, Akvile, Michael, Selena. This is Garrett. It's so nice to talk to you guys. We were just joking about technology earlier, but thank you all for holding it down. I do want to keep going, if it's cool with you, specifically with being women, agency owners, and Black, Indigenous, people of color faces. What are some of the challenges, unique challenges that you faced that other people, haven't? Like, what advice would you give to other, women and Black agency owners, people of color, when it comes to your own personal experience? And I know this is a tough question, but really interested to hear your perspectives.
I mean, this is a whole can of worms. So one of the challenges that I face as a Black business owner is that it's very difficult to get access to capital. And so we've just had to sell through it. It's just like, all right, bank won't give me a loan. Cool. Sell more things. The one thing that I would recommend, which I'm just now seeing the value in, I didn't really see the value in before, is getting the official certification as a woman-owned business, as a Black-owned business, because a lot of organizations get incentives to work with businesses of that type. So if you're in a pitch and you're being compared against a bunch of other vendors, you may get a leg up because you have that certification. So beyond that, I mean, a lot of the same challenges that you see everywhere else, but it's kind of magnified. Like, a lot of times I'll walk into a room and there's a lot of like the, dog whistle language and so on. Like, I'll give a fantastic pitch that I know like crushes it for most situations. And then I'll get an email back like, oh, we don't think you're strategic enough, which is basically like a coded way of being like, yeah, we don't think Black people are smart. So there's a lot of things that you'll run into in that way that you just got to be able to like roll with the punches to some degree. But at the same time, there's a lot more awareness of these issues now, and people are starting to look for ways to give, women-owned businesses, Black and Indigenous people of color-owned businesses and things like that the benefit of the doubt. So, I'm more leaning into it now than ever before.
I had some trouble early on when I'd go to in-person networking events, and being a woman, I don't know if it was necessarily those situations, but I know that ageism also played into a part where I would be in a group of people and there were some older gentlemen and they would just kind of talk over me or dismiss me anytime I was talking about my area of expertise. And I feel like the only time that they would give me their attention, even though I wouldn't want to work with them at this point, is that if I were to say something that was unique or that maybe they didn't think about, and then they're like, oh yeah, maybe you do know what you're talking about. And I felt like I'm an extrovert, but I'm pretty timid. I don't really come out of my shell until people get to know me a little better. But I think in the last few years, with the climate of how things have progressed and realizing that I should use my voice more, I started public speaking. I went to Toastmasters for years straight without missing a week, just so I wouldn't be so terrified. and I could enter these types of conversations and scenarios, whether they're online and in person, and actually communicate better. So it's like, no, I know what I'm talking about. I don't know everything, but give me a chance to either showcase what I can do or what we can do as a company, and just really trying to be level with people and just treat everybody equally. Like, I try to be like that with people and hope people will be the same, but of course not everyone is. And one thing I noticed is I've decided to test something. Like, I always tell our clients, test different variables with your business, excuse me, with your advertising. But I was really trying to get accepted to speak at one event, and I tried for several, there's several attempts, and I kept getting denied. And I thought, why don't I change my tone? And I hate that I had to think like this. This was kind of in the midst of the Me Too thing just starting. And I said, I'm going to pretend like I'm a very self-assured man. And I wrote this pitch, and it felt so unnatural. And it kind of wanted me to throw up. I was like, I know everything. Like, ask me anything. I'm the shit, pardon me. So I wrote it, and I got accepted. And I was like, is that why I got accepted? Or like, it really made me think, like, what like, that was the only variable compared to other times that I had pitched this one event. And I don't know, I feel like we just need to give people, regardless of the tone in their voice, of like, just give them a chance to explain, or just be better listeners.
Yeah, and I think for me, as a woman and also a woman of color, I've experienced a lot of similar things. Going to conferences, even if I was speaking, just feeling as if the conversations weren't on the level that they would be if I was a man, or if I was perhaps older or looked more established. I struggle with also looking younger. So for somebody approaching me, if I'm a little shy and not able to open up the way I want to initially, it's just another thing that is a difficulty to work through. So for me, I found just trying to get credibility however I can, whether that's speaking, whether that's, doing webinars, forming alliances with people who I know are great people who always have my back. And it sucks that you have to be a woman and feel this way. And, one of the things that is tough that I've experienced is I tend to have a stronger rub you the wrong way tone when I feel like I'm being approached in that way. So then I dial it back and try to be a little more feminine and soft, and it just doesn't work. So like Akvile said, for me, once I just owned the fact that, you might have to come off a little strong and just own your shit and be like, this is me, it became a lot easier. Budgets opened up a little better. If I had to talk to developers and team members, they took me more seriously. And it's just like, it's a game you have to play, and it's so frustrating, but it does feel like it's gotten better over time.
That's really, yeah, go ahead.
No, there's a story that Akvile shared, and I don't want to tell your story, but I just want to say that, like, that shit really pissed me off when I read what happened to her, and I was just like, there's issues that I deal with as a person of color, but just like the things that she's had to deal with in running her business, it's just so messed up. And it really sucks that these things even have to be like dealt with when we're all great at what we do, when we're all just like, awesome people in this space. Like, why should you even need to like consider these things? But I'm glad to see that we're all like doing well in our businesses despite it. So that's all I got.
Yeah. What other advice would you give for early on agency owners that, are in that position where it's like, there's always that tricky thing of when you're not necessarily desperate for new clients, but you feel like you can't be a chooser. What would you say to those folks who are in that position where they find someone who is not the right fit? Like, how quickly do you get out of that situation? How do you handle those situations?
Usually very quickly. If if there's any red flags and I wouldn't feel comfortable passing that person on to someone else and that could take them on, I just will say, like, listen, I'm sorry, this isn't the right fit. I send them some resources. I try to still be helpful. Just kind of, send them a few things and then just wrap the conversation. If we're at capacity, if it's not the right fit for us in terms of industry or experience or the platforms that they want us to utilize, then I have a network of people. I actually have like a digital spreadsheet with people that are, the different types of work that they do across marketing and advertising, whose area of expertise is what. So then that way I know who to refer to, and I have a process put into place of who gets first dibs on it based on, it's always who's going to be the best mutual fit. But of course, it goes down to maybe area of expertise, or maybe they've worked with this particular type of client before. And then we do also have an area in the spreadsheet where, if they have a referral fee, then we'll use that if we have to decide between two people of like, okay, like who's going to get benefited all the way around here. So that's kind of how we do that.
Good. By the way, for anyone in the audience, at this point, we do have about 15 minutes left. So if you do have a question, feel free to add it to the question chat, and we'll make sure that we get to it. But, kind of switching things up, and I really do appreciate all of you, sharing your experiences and insights in there, because I can only imagine. I'm a white man, like I don't, have the same world experience. But I can imagine how tough it is starting off and having to deal, like to your point, Selena, it's like playing the game. It like sucks that you even have to do it. And so in terms of resources, community, any places that you all recommend? I know you, Selena, you said Traffic Think Tank earlier. Like, what are some places in your lives in the agency world that you would recommend a new agency owner to reach out to get involved with, to find support, no matter what their needs are?
I mean, I think it just comes down to building your network. Like Selena saved my ass a couple times before. There was one time where we had a client and like my whole team went on vacation. It was just like me left, and I was like, yo, Selena, I need some help with content, and she delivered like hardcore. So having that network of great people that can support you, wherever you find them is the most important thing. But to Selena's point earlier, Traffic Think Tank is great. Depending on what space you're in, there's a lot of these types of things. Like there's something called Summit. They have like the agency summit thing. They do a bunch of events and so on. And I found a lot of great people in that. And it's a variety of different agency types. It's not just, marketing agencies, it's development agencies and so on. So there's a lot of different groups out there, and it really just comes down to, what's going to be most relevant to you so you can build that network.
Yeah, on the paid search and paid social side of things, an easy way to get in and meet some new people. It's a very welcoming and warm community. So if you want to hop on Twitter, if you're there, you can go to hashtag FB Ads Chat or PPC Chat. There's a weekly chat that happens on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific for PPC Chat, and you can just hop in there, join the conversation, or you can just use those at any time to, if you run into a situation where you have a challenge with, something going on with your clients, you can just tweet that out, and I can pretty much guarantee that you're going to get a response from at least one person, if not many more, and that's a really great way to start connecting with people in the industry.
That's awesome. I think those are great, resources. I love Twitter. I know, like, I reached out to all of you guys on Twitter. I feel like people, especially in our industry, for the most part, are very, kind of open and communicative and friendly. And so I appreciate that. We do have a couple of questions I'd love to share with y'all. So Bradford asks, do you recommend white labeling services that you have experience with but can't entirely produce in-house? So I guess when we're talking about vendors and using different tools and offering a service, how do you guys feel about white labeling?
I don't see a problem with it.
Go ahead.
Okay, you first.
No, you started.
I don't see a problem with it, and all the big agencies do it. And they're not all that like transparent about it or anything like that. But I think it really just comes down to like, what do you want to be as an agency? If you want to be like the super transparent agency that's like, yeah, we can do that, but we have a partner with it, that's fine. Just be upfront with it. Or if you want to be the agency that's just like, all right, we do all these things and it's a series of contractors, but you don't know that, that's fine too. It really just comes down to like who you want to be. So I think it's fine either way. You just gotta, own it in either direction.
You covered it.
Cool. Rachel wants to know, how did you end up honing in on each of your niches? So, or on the service that you offer? how'd you hone in on it? Selena?
Yeah, so for us, we started out with a number of services and we just looked at what was most enjoyable, what worked well that we were able to get results in, and also what was the most profitable. So like I mentioned earlier, we narrowed down from a bunch of the other services and we started focusing on just three key areas, which is content strategy and production, SEO strategy, and then the auditing process. So you'll be able to find real quick when it comes to services. And then as far as the types of businesses and industries you want to work in, I just started working with a whole bunch of different industries and I ended up falling into working with publishers more often and became extremely proficient. So that's where we continued to push.
For us, it was, oh gosh, I just placed space on the question. I'm sorry.
How'd you hone your niche?
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you, Mike. So
Mhm.
originally I started with paid search and paid social. So we just said we do digital advertising, but I've always been more drawn to the paid social side of things. I really love targeting people and figuring out the psychology of, interests and behaviors and how to reach people through social channels. So one of the things I decided to do when we hit that 8-month slump where I lost those 2 big clients was I'm like, okay, this is the opportune time to start testing. So I own my own business. Why am I not doing things that I love more? And I enjoyed and I did paid search well, but it wasn't something that fulfilled me. So I decided to cut that out of our services and just refer that out to other friends that do enjoy that. And I decided to specialize in paid social and focus in on my craft, learn more about it, dedicate more time to it, and start advertising that this is what we specialize in. And I thought, if this test fails, I can always revert and offer more services again. But since then, I feel like a lot of small to medium-sized business owners start understanding exactly what we do because I feel like maybe they felt a little worried to approach us about, oh, what does digital advertising mean? But as soon as we said Facebook ads, Instagram ads, like, oh, I know exactly what that is. And then we started getting more business because of it.
Yeah, I think the market will tell you what your niche is, like based on what clients you maintain, which ones you lose, which ones like cancel with you, you're going to learn very quickly. But everything that both Selena and Akvile were saying is true. Like you've got to find that Venn diagram over like what you love doing and what, actually makes you money. Because similarly I kind of was like, okay, I want to build the agency of my dreams that can do big picture things all the way down to small picture things like channel specific stuff. And we did a lot of great projects that were bigger picture projects, but we don't have the portfolio to go after everybody's design work, or we don't have the portfolio to do like 10 experiential marketing campaigns, even though we've done 1 or 2. So the market is just going to tell you like, okay, yeah, cool, you can do those things, but you're gonna have to do them off the back of like that core stuff that you're really, really good at and can repeat. And last point I want to make is there's a great book that I would encourage anyone starting an agency to read. It's called Built to Sell. And it was like such a game changer book for me to read. And it talks about like how you build things that are repeatable, how you want to have like 2 people in every role, so there's that like competition. And as long as you're building something that someone would buy, you're going to end up making a lot of money in the short term anyway. So yeah, that's all I got.
No, it's really interesting to hear how you all kind of get to where you're at. Last question, because we are at the end and you all are serious champions for holding us down while I'm dealing with all sorts of tech stuff. But did any of you start your agencies while you were working a full-time job? And if so, how'd you manage that? I don't think any of you did you?
Well, I
didn't.
kind of did, but kind of didn't. So like I'd mentioned, I was reaching out and starting to take clients, personal clients, so that I could build the roster to do that. But I didn't actually formally launch while I had a full-time job. So with the 1 to 2 clients that I started overlapping, I think I quit within, 4 months, 5 months, and I would just have to do that work at night outside of my normal work time till then.
Yeah,
There you
I had
have
a lot
it.
of,
Oh, go ahead.
oh no, I had a lot of freelance clients like throughout the series of agencies that I worked in. But it never got to a point where it was like, all right, this can completely replace my salary. So it was never that. It was really me just being like, all right, I'm going to go finally do this. And then suddenly everything just started to come in. It's one of those like alchemist moments.
Mine was similar. I thought about it for quite some time, but I didn't have the courage to finally do it. But I got to the point in my previous job where I wanted more responsibility and the authority to do things, and there was no more room for me to grow. And I was just like, okay, this is the time to do it. And if I can offer a lesson to anybody, that even if you think it's the smallest, maybe it's a stupid question, but to this day, like asking what's on your mind to somebody that you have in mind can be so fruitful. So a mutual friend of ours, her name is Pamela Lund, and I reached out to her. We were industry friends. We weren't that close at the time, but she's been doing her own thing and doing she's been consulting and doing paid search and paid social. And we could talk about anything candidly. And I put off for 9 months asking her if I could just shadow her for a day, because I had no idea how to even start my own business, let alone run an agency at some point. So I finally got to the point of frustration where I asked her, and she said, I'll do you one better. I'll give you some of my clients and I'll teach you everything I know. And because I've been taking on too much and I actually wanted to scale back and start a separate business that's unrelated, so you'll gift me my time back. And I was just like, how do I pay you back for that? So now if there's anyone in your life that, even if they're not a close friend, if you just follow them online, like ask that question, like, hey, can I buy you coffee or virtually or something? Ask that question, because it can result in like huge life-changing things. So I took the leap after I gave my work notice and then announced it online, and it kind of started from there. So it was a little bit of unorthodox in the way I started, but hopefully that can inspire some of you to ask those questions and find a mentor yourself.
That's such an amazing story, and especially right now with all the challenges in the world between, the pandemic. We're seeing a lot of great stuff happening with Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement. One thing I've been doing on my podcast, that as we end, I'd love for each of you to share with us. I asked my guests, what's your right now cause? So what is a cause or a charity or something that you can do in your community that's really important to you that you would want to amplify to our audience, as well as where's the best way to get in touch with you online after this? If our listeners and audience want to find you, how can they get in touch? So Selena, why don't we start with you? What's the name of your agency? How do we get in touch with you? And then what is your right now cause?
Yeah, so agency is Orthros Media. You can find me on any social platform at Selena Vidya, which is where I'm most active, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And for me, so I've been investing in a lot of smaller causes over time, but what I'm really pushing into is just supporting smaller women business owners, because I have so many in my network. And I feel like, you always run into, when you start a business, people want things for free, or they don't they don't understand the time that you're putting into it. So just amplifying anybody I can who has started something, who, has a product, a service, and is just a great person. So it's more people capital, I guess, that I'm investing in than specific causes.
I think that's beautiful. I think it's important, and to pay it forward sort of thing. Mike, your agency name, how people find you online, and what's your right now cause?
Agency is I Pull Rank. I'm I Pull Rank on all the social things. And my right now cause, I'm actually a founding member of a advocacy group called Black and Brilliant, which is all about helping Black and Indigenous people of color break through the middle in organizations. So I lead our tech and media team, or group rather, and we are doing a lot of like content creation and education in support of all of these efforts, and we're basically like the internal agency for this advocacy group. And then I'm also a part of another part of the group, which is like, AI and data science. Because one of the things I'm really passionate about is this problem of bias against people of color in artificial intelligence. So working on a couple white papers around that and things of that nature. So yeah, that's my main thing, blackandbrilliant.org for more info.
That's
Awesome.
amazing.
Yeah, we'll have that link in the show notes. Yeah, that's really cool. And really, it's a real issue right now in terms of the biases. And obviously we want to try and get ahead of it, but that's cool. I'm going to check that out after. Akvile, in terms of your agency name, how people find you online, and then what is your right now cause?
You can find me at acvertise.com. Our agency is called Acvertise, or on Twitter and all the other socials at Akvile DeFazio. probably easier to go through acvertise.com because my name's a little unique. But so I'm always trying to pay it forward, pay it back, and help people because, you know, like our friends that helped me get to where I am today. I'm always trying to help other younger people, women, people of color. So there's actually, once kind of everything really started this year, it really made an impact on me. And I was like, how can I help more people? So I tweeted out that, you know, if you're a person of color and I can offer any sort of mentoring, I would really love to. So I had a few people reach out, and I've had 2 new mentees over the past year. And one of them just introduced me to this woman who's a licensed therapist out of Mississippi, and her practice is called Legacy Wellness. I don't know if she's listening, but we have a call coming up because she does a lot of pro bono work to provide free therapy services for people in the Black community. And I'm planning to give her my services for free to help her set up with Facebook ads so she can reach more people across the country, because I feel like this is a really important thing, and that's something that I'm really passionate about.
That's amazing. This has been fantastic. We're a little over, but thank you, all 3 of you, for joining me. It's really a pleasure to just, you know, be able to talk shop, learn from you, and share with you. And I really personally feel thankful to have connected with each of you. This is the first time for me. So thank you again for being my guest. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all found this really helpful. Reach out to our wonderful panelists. They are all available to provide advice. They're all around online. My name is Garrett Sussman. I'm the head of content at Traject. This has been a Traject agency webinar. So everyone have a great rest of your week, month, holiday season, and we'll get done with 2020 soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.